Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Today we're talking about sex and relationships. My guest today is Mike Iamele. He is a sex and life coach for queer men. Mike's job is to help you have the relationship and sex you've always wanted. Mike helps clients release shame, improve sexual confidence, and understand their desires. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. So before we get started, for those listening, just a quick little disclaimer. Mike nor myself are therapists or physicians or anything like that. This is just for educational and entertainment purposes only. So if you guys have mental health or medical concerns, you want to consult your licensed providers in your state. And then lastly, this is an adult conversation. We are going to be talking about sex, relationships. So just make sure that you're in a comfortable setting. If you're watching your nephew or something, you might want to throw some headphones on. So we'll go ahead and get started. So, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Some of your work experience, and what do you kind of do now?
Sure. All loaded questions. I live in Boston. I'm from the Boston area, but I've lived all over. Gosh, my life journey to get to this moment. So, I'm gonna be real abridged because I want to get to some juice here. But I used to work in public relations. I used to own a PR firm where I specialized in healthcare reform. And I came down with a really violent illness. And so, through vomiting blood daily, I ended up falling in love with my male roommate. I had never been with a man at the time. And so that was an interesting process. I blogged about it a few years later and it went viral. And I think 100,000 people shared it overnight. And so I was kind of in between careers. I was doing some coaching work. A lot of gay and queer men, and especially questioning men, were reaching out to me asking for support. And that was all like 12 years ago. So through some miracle, it kind of led me into sex counseling certification. It led me to developing a way of understanding sexuality that was unique and more to do with what we're sensitive to and to kind of reconceptualize our desires. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today.
Wow. By chance, is your husband the guy that you're talking about?
My husband is, yeah. So I am still with him. There's actually a
Wow.
musical about the story, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting, off Broadway now. But yep, we're still together and we're married now.
Well, Mike, let's just take a couple seconds. We have a lot of romantics in the room, so in our virtual room here, can you just tell us a little bit about that? So you had an illness, you had a roommate, and then you guys fell in love.
Yeah, essentially. So, I'm condensing about a year into a few minutes right now, but we had been friends in college, loosely, off and on friends, and we moved into an apartment. My older sister's room friend was also there, so there was one woman who was a few years older than us, and the two of us. And I came down with a sickness about 6 months, 6 or 7 months into living there. My sister's roommate, she was not around a lot because she had a boyfriend. She spent most nights over his place, and so there was no one really to take care of me. And Garrett, my now husband at the time roommate, he was a pharmacy resident. He worked with patients all the time. He knew how to navigate the system, and he would bring me to and from appointments. He would clean up my blood after I disgustingly vomited. He would cook me dinner. He would rub my back when I was in pain. I was since diagnosed with one of the things I was diagnosed with is severe pancreatitis. So I was in pain a lot. And through that process, we kind of realized the touches felt very intimate. And I had never felt that from a man before. And we did something that might be funny to people listening, but we did a lot of emailing. And I know that sounds weird here, especially we were roommates, but there were a few pros to emailing. It gave us an opportunity to collect our thoughts, to share something without the fear of somebody's reaction, and to react without, being immediate. And so that was probably about a 6, 7 month process of kind of navigating feelings, trying things out. I remember first time kissing a man. I had never felt facial hair while kissing somebody before. So that was a whole process. And we really played with watching porn together and kind of exploring ways where our physical desires intersected without necessarily pushing ourselves beyond what we were ready for.
And it's interesting too, I'm a dating coach, and one of the things sometimes I might tell some clients is like, work on building a friendship with someone and an emotional bond and kind of see where that goes. And it kind of sounds like that happened with you guys. It's like you guys had a friendship, an emotional
Yeah.
bond. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what was actually great and is great for our relationship today is we are so radically honest with each other because that's kind of how our relationship started, how we navigated it. And so oftentimes today I will say things like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm going to go to the bedroom. But if you don't check on me in 10 minutes, I will be even more upset with you. So we've kind of found this way to having to be sort of playful even when we're really upset and just kind of honest about what we're feeling.
Yeah, communication is so important. And for those listening, I work with a lot of guys and a lot of people value communication. So I think that's
Sure.
awesome that you guys started that early on and obviously it carried through. So thank you for sharing that, Mike. I'm
Yeah, of
curious to
course.
hear that. So, in your experience, let's talk about sex a little bit. What
Yeah.
relationship do most queer men have with sex?
So it can be across the board, really. But one thing that is a commonality for many of us is shame, right? We have been taught that our sexuality, our desires may be shameful or wrong. Often there's a level of secrecy to the way that our sexuality may develop. And so in my case, we were very kind of closed off from the world for about 2 years as we were exploring. For many of us, we're looking at porn secretly. We are hooking up with people secretly. And so the levels of shame and secrecy, which intertwined here, create some complications that actually make kink highly relevant to our population. So kink can be really important here because kink is really just recontextualizing or reclaiming shame. We can play with one kink I might work with my husband is ownership, owning or being owned, which is a funny way to talk about just committing to somebody because that's really all that it is. But we play with it in a kinkified way to help ourselves reconcile or deal with it. And so I always say to people, especially we want to use kink to go back to those early experiences and heal that kid. To say to that kid that it can be really sexy to spy on somebody, especially in your relationship, to kind of peer out. It can be really sexy to do things under covers or things that might feel like, oh my God, is somebody gonna, I always tell people to, if you're gonna have doggy style, face a doorway because the thought of somebody walking in can heighten the experience. And so one way that I'm always interested is how do we actually use that shame that so many of us have to actually share more of ourselves, express ourselves, show parts of ourselves that feel really scary, but through kink actually create intimacy and bring us closer to someone and share experiences that were lonely. Because again, in the shame, in the secrecy, many gay and queer men feel really alone in their sexuality, right? We don't know others are like us or have the same experiences as us, and it can feel really isolating. And so one of the things I'm always doing with sex is how can we use sex as a tool for increased intimacy, increased expression of self, increased really sharing so that we realize we're not that different from anybody else. And in fact, even our worst trauma is something that when shared and when held with another person can actually create immense healing.
That's what I was going to say. And for those listening, oh my gosh, you just dropped a lot of gold nuggets, and I hope you guys are taking notes, or you know, because basically, it kind of sounds like you're saying kink can heal shame.
Absolutely. That's at
That's
least been my
amazing.
experience and
Yeah,
many, many,
yeah,
many
yeah,
clients.
yeah, 100%. And it's also interesting that you said, I wrote it down. You said share experiences that were lonely. That makes
Yeah.
me feel like emotional
Yeah.
because that is how it was. Growing up, I came out around maybe I was 19 or so. So that entire time,
Yeah.
me having crushes on men and straight guys, like that's a lonely experience, right? And then finally
Yes.
being able to be kinky with someone, like that's a really beautiful thing. Yeah. The other thing that kind of comes to mind, some memories you brought up, is I've gone to some tantra
Hmm.
classes and sensual touch and all that, and right away I already knew it was a healing thing. And I also went to a nude yoga class one time in San
Yeah.
Diego, and it was my first nude, like it was a dance class, a nude dance class, and we were all naked and just dancing around in a circle. Like that was really empowering, and just being like confident with my body. And then at the tantra, the sensuality class, it was a lot of like slow emphasis on touch and just being very mindful and checking in. And yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah, I think one thing that can happen to a lot of us with our sexuality is it, especially in today's world, is becomes very digitized, which another way to say that is very mental. So sexuality can be mental. And before I forget to say this, one way I look at sex a lot of times is sex from the body versus sex from the mind. We think of kink as mental sex. It can be very shame eradicating. It can be very conceptual, whereas pleasure is body sex. And ideally, we want both. We want kink and we want pleasure to have really great sex. But for many of us, many of us, we start our sexual journey in the digital world, right? Through porn, especially in today's fast-paced porn. Maybe a few generations ago, this wasn't the case, but it certainly is today. We have the apps. We've got Grindr and Sniffies and Scruff and you name it today, right? And so we have opportunities to have a lot of kinky conversation, a lot of mental stimulation, but not always that physical aspect where we are physically feeling safe with other queer men, or we are dancing freely like you described, or going to yoga. And by the way, these do not have to be for everyone. I personally, admittedly, have never been to a nude yoga class myself. So we don't have to show our bodies to anyone if that doesn't feel right for us. But reconnecting back to the physical can be really important because sometimes many of us have the sort of, and I'm going to be explicit here, the door unlocked, anonymous ass up fantasy, right? Super hot. In reality, our bodies may not feel safe with that if we don't know this person, and that can be really scary. And so there can often be a disconnect between our mind, what is kinky, what is fantasy, what have we conceptualized shame through or looked at in porn versus what our bodies want. And one thing I'm always doing is finding ways to use your desires and your sensitivities to actually bridge that gap. It's why I use the word sensitivity, because sensitivity implies both emotion and physical sensation.
That's interesting that you say gap because my mind immediately went to that. It feels like a gap there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really quick, can you define kink?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is one of those terms that lots of people have different definitions for. Sometimes the technical definition people will say is that fetish is something that you need during sex to be aroused, whereas kink is just something that you like or a preference. That is not my definition, but that is one you might hear out there. Really, for me, kink is anything that gets you aroused. And so that could be anything. We can talk about feet as something that is kinky. We can talk about ownership as something that's kinky.
Oh.
One of the most fun ways I have in discovering some of your own kinks, we can actually do an exercise here. So for anyone listening, if you can grab a piece of paper or pause and grab yourself a piece of paper, and you draw a horizontal line through the middle of that page. Above that line, the very top of the page, I want you to write the word praise. And at the very, very bottom, I want you to write the word shame. We have just created what I'm going to use my $1 million word here, dichotomy, a shame-praise dichotomy. You can just call it a shame-praise split. I'm just trying to sound impressive today. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at how we have been praised for things and how we've had shame for things. I'm going to ask you, if it's okay, Andrew, what's something that you've gotten a lot of praise for, like being intelligent,
My
being
achievement.
nice? Sorry, what is it?
My achievements,
Achievements.
my degrees, my corporate job. Yeah.
Okay, let's take one of those. So your corporate job, on a scale of 0 to 100, how much praise did you get for this job?
Like a 9. Or
Okay, so
100, 90.
90. Yeah. So this is way up there by that praise sign. So we might write this job way up there. And so this job, what were some of the attributes? Like, what was it about this job? Were you compensated? Like, were you compensated well? Were you really organized? What were you praised for?
So I'll just say I got to interact with high level executives,
Okay.
and that was an accomplishment to some people.
Awesome.
Right?
So you were around important people, right? So you yourself were transitively important, right? You were seen as someone important. Is that right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to guess then the 90% down towards that shame, being seen as worthless, as not important, as a nobody is going to feel really shameful for you. Is that right?
Mike, yes.
I know,
Yes.
calling it out here today. I won't go too deep.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You can.
But for everybody listening, I want you to start thinking about these things because here's where kink comes into play. if what you have been told, and let's say we stick a word on this, let's say the word important, we would write over that middle line. What you have just told me is a formula. For you to feel important, you need to be around important people, or people see you as important. But if people see you as a nobody, you don't feel important. So here's what we want to do with kink. We want to say, well, what if you had a kink where you were like worthless? You didn't matter. Somebody, in a safe relationship with somebody that, you trust, that you don't matter, you're worthless. Maybe you're even owned or humiliated in some way. And the irony is, if that makes you feel important, which I'm going to guess it will, because this person created an entire kink around just for you, then you've just broken a spell. Because now, no longer in your system and your nervous system do you need to be important and impressive anymore to feel that. You could be the opposite and still feel it. And so what we are actually doing here is using kink, developing personalized kink. And I really specify this because I've been on Pornhub, I've been on the apps, I have seen I work every day with clients. I know what we think kink is, right? We think kink is like ball gag and,
whips.
Restraints and whips and your cattails. And we have very specific ideas. Leather, latex, we know what kink is. That is generic kink. And it can be super hot. It can be super fun. But do you want to know what's even hotter than that? I had a client come to me last week and he said to me, hey, Mike, I really want to get into kink and I want to do this, that, and the other. And he gave me a million things and I said, okay, cool. But I remember you played football in college. Is that right? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. And I said, you wore jock straps sometime? He said, yeah. And I said, you worked out and you did CrossFit. And he said, yeah. I said, here's what I want you to do. Instead of all that, I want you to put on a jock strap. I want you to ask your boyfriend to put on a jock strap. I want you to go to the gym, go to CrossFit together. I want you to get disgustingly sweaty and work out really hard. I want you to keep looking over, him knowing what you're doing. You know what he's doing. And then I want you guys to go home. And I want you to put on a football game. This isn't going to work for everyone, but this is going to work for you. Put in a football game. And I want you to touch knees. And then I want you to slide your hand over to him. And then I want you to take off your jock strap and start blowing him while you're smelling that jock strap. And he's like, all right, done. Stop talking, Mike. Please do not say anymore. Like I'm texting him right now. And I say all of this because we want kink that heals our personal trauma. Now, yes, we have collective trauma that's around masculinity, right? Around cop fantasies and leather. And so we have ways that this has been filtered down and it can be super hot. And believe me, I played with lots of the collective kink. But what I want is sex to always be personal, to always be personally healing. And that means just like what we did with Andrew, we want to look at what have you been praised for? And therefore, the opposite is something you have shame around. And so how do we begin to work with that and actually create personalized kink that make our inner children feel whole?
You're just blowing my mind. Wow. I really hope folks are listening and taking notes. Yeah. And as you asked me those questions, like I had emotion come up and I've done a lot of fucking healing, years of it. So I know that is the right path because I can feel it. So wow, that was a lot in a very good way. I'm just kind of curious for me. So you kind of recommended because so you recommended trying being owned and things like that, right? Yeah, interesting. I'm taking some notes.
Okay. So just talk to me more. I don't want to go too deeply into you, but some emotion is coming up around that. What thoughts or feelings are coming up?
Well, basically, when you said that you recognize my achievement and you said the opposite of that, say it again. Is you said that I probably feel insecure about self-worth, or you said something.
Yeah. So let me say it this way. Some of the whenever we get a lot of praise for something, okay, let me erase all that. And I'm going to give you a very clear thing. I want people to do this exercise with me if you can, because it's going to be a lot more poignant. Okay. Andrew, we're going to take another shame praise dichotomy. So the word praise at the top, a line in the middle, and the word shame at the bottom. And I want to ask you, Andrew, let's take the word lovable. Pretend the word lovable is over that middle line. When you were growing up, did you learn it was more lovable to be gay or to be straight?
Straight. And
0 to 100, if you had to say, how much better was it to be straight? Or another way to say this is, when you were growing up, how much would you have traded, or how much would you think your parents or society trade for you to have been straight? 0 to 100, how much better was it to be straight?
Wow. Probably like an 85 or 90.
85 or 90. Okay, let's say 90 for dramatic effect here. So 90. What that means is that everyone else, you can't change being gay. You can't change being queer. This is who we are, right? So everyone else, the ugliest, most boring straight man starts at that 0. You have just dropped down 90 points towards the shame category. So your worth starts at that place because you can't change it. So this is where your worth starts. Now, everyone listening to this call knows what that place feels like. It is unsustainable. We can't live there. We can't survive there. So you've got to do something to not stay at that place. What are you going to do? What's a way that you're going to get people to like you or you're going to get more worth? For you, you told me achievements. That's one way, not an uncommon one for many gay men, right? So this is a way, okay. For some, that's not going to get you 100% of the way there. That's going to get you a few points. So maybe you're 20 points up. Well, maybe you are funny too. Or maybe you're good looking and you go to the gym and you have a great body. Maybe you are good at sex. Maybe you make lots of money or wear nice clothing. Every gay or queer man has different strategies, but we have got to cobble up at least 90 points just to be equal to the ugliest, most boring, generic straight man, right? And then hopefully we want to be a few points above that. So we have a lot of rules. You've got to be good looking.
Yeah.
You've got to be funny. You've got to go to the gym. You've got to be. Now, here is what happens. What happens when you walk into a room and another gay or queer man has the exact same rules as you? What happens? What do we do?
Like compete or judge ourselves or
all of the above, right? So first thing is compete. Love that. I love this. I say it, and gay men always immediately they say, "Oh, I know, compete, tear them down." That's an easy one because if we tear them down, then we don't have to feel that shame. Whoever loses has to go down to the bottom and feel that shame again. So of course we tear each other down. Or on the opposite end of compete, we puff out our chest. Believe me, going to a gay brunch is not the day I'm going to wear my scrubby clothes. That is the day I want to look nice. I want to make sure that people think that I'm impressive, right? Because that's important. Or we have a third way, which is to avoid them. And often we will avoid gay men around the areas we're insecure about. If we aren't confident in sports, we are not joining gay sports. I'll tell you that much. If we are insecure about, dressing really fancy, we're not going to the fancy parties because these are the 3 strategies we have. It becomes almost impossible to make friends or to date when we have these dynamics. And these are survival. This is a real thing. If we feel that shame, we can't survive down there. So we are doing everything we can to get validation, to still feel higher. What I'm telling you today is go the opposite route. Validation will be a never-ending black hole. We will constantly be needing things to compensate. What I'm saying is, what if through kink, you had less shame about the things you're ashamed of? Because the example I gave you is a pretty generic example. I haven't even factored in ableism, racism, weight, height. There are so many ways that can add in more shame. So this is, when I say the most boring generic, I mean able-bodied, thin, six-pack white man, right? There's so many layers that we go on beyond this. And they're important for all of us to reconcile and reckon with. And so what we're talking about today is if you have gotten so much praise for being important and around important people, what that means is that when you aren't around important people, you have to deal with that shame again. And so when you are feeling like a nobody, right? When somebody calls you a nobody, you feel like a nobody, it makes you feel that same shame. And what I'm saying is let's use sex to heal that. Because then I don't care who you're around. You are unconditionally lovable and you always have been. And I am so sorry we live in a world that made you feel otherwise.
I just need to take a minute to just breathe a little bit. That's a lot of truth. So that's just like, yeah, wow. So one thing I'll just kind of tell you is what I've noticed in my dating life is when the guy is not like high achieving, that can be problematic for me. And luckily I have skills and tools to question my thoughts and all of that. But it's very interesting that you brought that up, is because that's almost threatening when they're not successful or like high achieving. So that's one thing that kind of stood out to me. But wow, Mike.
Do you mind if I talk about that a little, Andrew?
Sure,
just
please.
Because I think this is important for everyone listening. So let's talk about the conundrum a lot of us have with gay dating. Because one, we have these rules for life, right? So these rules are the only way to be worthy is to be high achieving or to be funny or to be whatever. And so, of course, we project that out in others. We want others to be that. But remember what we said about competition. If he's more high achieving or markedly more high achieving than you are, he's going to trigger you. So now we have this conundrum, and this is very common with a lot of gay men and sex and dating, is we want someone that matches our rules, but we also, if they overmatch our rules, if they're too great at it, it can be triggering for us. And then there's this other sneaky one, which is, what if they aren't high achieving? It can be triggering for us because we're like, wait, how are you like happy and successful and people like you, but you don't even have a good job? And like, what we really want to say is, F you. How dare you? I have worked my ass off. I have worked so hard to be this. And how dare you be worthy and lovable without this? And that is immensely triggering as well.
And the other one too is like, this is, sounds terrible, but this is a healing space. I'll say is like,
Yeah.
you don't deserve me. Like that has come
Right.
up. I literally, I mean, I'm in this space where I have tools, but that has come up before. And it's very triggering and upsetting, because not upsetting, but triggering is like, how are you like not that successful? I had to work so fucking hard, corporate
That's
job,
right.
start my own business, all of this fucking shit.
Yeah.
And you got me with just, and I freaking I have to teach, online dating and skills and say this and this. And you freaking got me by like having a boring profile. Like, so
And I want to unpack a little bit further, because what's really going on there is, what we're saying is, you don't deserve me. But what we're really saying, even deeper than that, is I am only lovable when I do all of these things. But if I did absolutely nothing, then I'm not, if I didn't have this, I'm not necessarily lovable. And that's really what the kink is helping us to work through, is if I'm just a worthless piece of crap, owned whatever thing,
wow.
oh my God, I still feel lovable. And that starts to change our nervous system. So what we're really doing anytime we're playing with kink, and again, I realize right now I'm speaking more to people who are in safe relationships or
Yeah,
feel safe.
yes, yep,
Sometimes our one-off hookups, I do want to talk about those in a moment, and I
sure.
will. So there's different kink we can play with, but the most extreme kink, we want to feel safe. That's always going to be our prerequisite here. And so we do want to heal some of these things, because then we can let them go. And then we can start to realize that, honestly, this, what I call the shame praise dichotomy, or the be successful, be funny, whatever, that's the construction of a character. And that's how we become characters in life. It is just like playing a video game character. We learn how to be the character that we can most believably play, and that actually gets us the validation and worth we want in life. But we aren't it, and we were never it. And if we go back in time, we realize we had different values at different times, which meant we've played multiple characters. We simply evolve the character to the best character we can create. And what we want in a long-term loving, healing relationship or sex life is one where we can cycle through different characters, or we can drop characters
Mm,
altogether. And that's really fun, where we can be Dom, then we're sub, then we're an evil genius, then we're a loser, then we're weird party boy, it doesn't matter, because the truth is, we are much more unconditional and infinite than any of our strategies for getting worth.
wow. So first and foremost, I just want to say, like, for those kind of listening along, like, I am very aware of my perfectionist tendency, and I work with a therapist on that. I'm very aware and grateful, but I never realized that kink is another modality to work through that. That's insane to me, in a positive way. I've done breath work. We all hear about psychedelics and all these different things, but I've never thought of kink that way. I kind of had an inclination because of what I talked about earlier with the dancing naked and stuff, but
Yeah.
that's interesting. I'm very much going to take this conversation seriously, and look into that. Yeah.
So here's the thing about me. I am a Trojan horse, right? We know I'm actually talking about spirituality here. We are
Hmm.
all jerking off. We are all having sex. We're all hooking up. I want to use what we're already doing and tell you, you are right. And your desires are right. Your instincts are right. The world has told you they're wrong, but they're right. So the things you feel drawn to, the feet, the pits, the
Hmm.
whatever, it's actually
Wow.
healing for your body knows how to heal itself. But we are conditioned to believe that we are wrong. And if we can start to understand that, actually, if I am being a perfectionist all day, every day, then being a freaking mess is going to be so healing for me. If I can just be messy and
Wow.
sloppy. And let's talk about our divas, because this is a great place to bring this in. Who do we love? We love divas. It's not that hard. The drag queens and divas we love, they are often slutty, bitchy, kind of a mess, all over the place, overly vulnerable. Why is that? Because of the things we can't be in life. And so they represent liberation. And just like the divas, you want to play a great game, figure out a diva that you love and pretend to be her in bed. Take on attributes of her. Be bitchy, be bossy, be slutty, be whatever, because that creates immense healing for us. It's everything we tell ourselves we aren't allowed to be in waking life. That's where I want you to be in the bedroom.
Wow. And just to kind of wrap this conversation up on my specific example, Mike, is so do you think, like, with my sexual partner, kind of showing up as like pretending I'm worthless and shame and like all of that, in that safe bedroom, like, do you think that could be a healing thing?
It totally can be, but let me get more specific with, is it okay if I ask you a few more questions?
Please, yeah.
I want to give you good advice here. So, okay, you told me that, high achieving, being around important people. What's another thing that has given you a lot of praise in your life? Like just an attribute, being funny, being smart, being interesting, being organized.
Being attractive, being organized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So take both those. Okay. So attractive, we know that the unattractive piece here. And then being organized, we're going to talk about messy. So what I want you is to be a character who is messy, not necessarily the most attractive, and not necessarily the most important person or center of attention. This might be a follower. This might be a try hard. We have lots of language to talk about that. Can you think of like a celebrity or a diva that maybe embodies that? Now, this is not diva hating. This is just an example here. I know gays can get real upset about this, but who is someone who you feel like is kind of a messy girl, who's all over the place, who maybe tries too hard? Again, no misogyny here. We're just using divas because gays love it.
Yeah, I can't think of it right now, but there's definitely that.
I'm going to give one. I'm going to take all the hate that I'm getting for this one. Brittany. I'm just going to say Brittany. She's a little bit messy. She's pretty. She's not like the hottest thing in the entire world, but somehow she has this magnetism to her, right? Like she kind of does all this kooky stuff on Instagram, but we all love her anyway. So Brittany is a great example for you. Play Brittany. Start to play. Just be so in the bedroom, especially if you want to take a submissive role. Maybe you're all over the place and you're dancing, you're being goofy, you're kind of in your own space. Or maybe this can bring in some worship energy where you are putting all the energy on the other guy and you are worshiping him. This is giving you an opportunity to not be the most important, to be kind of sloppy and messy and not organized, to not have to be the most attractive or put together, and yet still be lovable. And so we want to look at is how do we play with that shame in a kinkified or eroticized way?
I'm so blown away with you. So you're basically saying play a character in the bedroom.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Let me say it this way more specifically.
Of whatever character you're playing, you still have the worth.
Exactly, because let's say this more specifically. I'm playing a character right now of the guy who knows something about sex as an interview, right? I do not talk like this to all of my friends. I am playing a character. We are always playing characters. And when we realize that, we take ourselves less seriously because we are just innocent, I'm going to be hippie here, divine, unconditional children who take on the roles of society that give us worth. And when we start to realize that sex can be liberating and fun, it's a place where we can try on new ways of being, knowing it's just a character, and we can typically tolerate more discomfort the more aroused we are. So you might notice the hornier you get, you tend to look at the more shameful porn. You say the weird stuff. That's because we can tolerate more discomfort with that. So the more aroused you are, go there, be weird, be a character, wear something you wouldn't normally wear, say something you wouldn't normally say. And if you have the safe partnership, you can recognize that who cares if it's true or not? You are just about to come. Doesn't really matter.
What if we have a partner? So this is something I have struggled with in the past. Now we're aware that sex can be a healing thing, and we're going to be intentional about it. What if the sexual partner is not aware of that, though? Like, how do I just tell them, like, hey, I just want to try something? Like my coach, Mike, told me this. Like, can we just do that? Or like, how do you? And most of the time they are willing, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody is willing and not everybody. So here's what we are terrified of is kink shaming. We are terrified that we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to say something we want to try. And our partner is going to be like, that's disgusting or that's weird, right? Because we developed our sexuality in secrecy and in shame. So most of it is hidden behind an incognito window. Nobody is knowing what we really like, and it can be very vulnerable, which is another reason we gravitate towards those collective kinks, right? Because they're collectively liked. It's not something that's so personal and going back to our own trauma. Okay, so what we want to do and I'm getting a little bit deeper into my work of sensitivities here, is we want to be able to get to the why. Why do we like this? And here's a really easy example for anybody. So let's say that a kink you want to try is, I don't know, being tied up and owned, right? We've talked about owned. So a little restraint and maybe this feeling of ownership. And that might feel really hardcore or intense for our partner. So what we want to do is ask ourselves, what do I think that being tied up and owned will make me feel? And we say, well, if I'm tied up and owned, I think I'll feel free because I won't have to like make decisions anymore. Let's just say that. So if you can come to that, and we just want to look for an adjective or two, then you say to your partner, hey, I listened to this wacky guy, Mike, today, and he made me realize that I have a few kinks because I really like feeling free. You know, one of them is to feel tied up and owned because that's kind of the opposite. It allows me to feel free. But some other ones I have are things like going to a nude beach or, you know, having sex in front of a window. So is there anything that you're interested in that might make me feel free? What we want to do is tell them the emotion we're trying to feel and give them a few options. I cannot guarantee that your partner is going to be in this into the specific kink we're talking about. But what I can guarantee is if they know you enough, which is really all kink is about, and understand who you are on a deeper level, then they can develop kinks they're interested in that can work for you.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. One thing that I struggled with to reconcile in my mind before this conversation was the fact that I do like being, we'll just say for lack of a better term, like a dominant energy, but
Yeah.
I also do like being a like submissive energy. And I was
Yes.
so confused because I was like, wait, because I do sometimes I do like I've dated guys who are very submissive in the bedroom, and I liked it. I liked to be strong and powerful, and
Mm-hmm.
like they were,
Mm-hmm.
you know, blah blah blah. And but then I do like to, this won't be too much
Yeah.
TMI, but just laying on my back and just like having a very attractive, strong
Mm-hmm.
guy, you know, laying on me. And it makes me feel very safe. And so I
Yes.
was kind of confused because I'm like, how can I be both like I'm attracted to like masculine men and I love that they're strong and they're laying on me. That makes me feel safe. But I also like to be that guy too, though. So do you have any thoughts on reconciling those two things, for example?
Lots of thoughts. I might get some hate for this, but we are so much more diverse than we think and so much more complex and so much more fluid. You know, sexuality is it has so many pieces to it. There's a biological component, there's a psychological, there's, you know, experiences that were eroticized early, there's this, there's that. Most of us, remember, if we go back to characters, we are used to playing certain characters, but we can cycle through all the characters. We can play all of them. And it is amazing. I will tell you, when I'm being submissive and my husband's being dominant, the dynamic there is very different than when I'm dominant, he's submissive. He needs a different dominant from me. I need a different dominant from him. I need a different submissive, and he needs a different submissive. So it's finding that part of us. Every single human being is submissive at some points in life, right? We have all been yelled at by our parents. We have all been in trouble at school. We have been submissive. There is a submissive child in all of us. And what we're talking about is finding the kink to access that. In the same way, we've all been dominant somewhere in life. We've been yelling at people. We've been, you know, we've been wanting to get our way. We've ordered people around. We want to find that. Now, for some people, if they have a job where they're dominant all day, every day, they might favor towards the submissive because they just want to break from it. It doesn't mean that they're only submissive. What it means is they're trying to find that balance of what they don't
Mm.
get to experience. And so my hope for the world is that we all get to play more. We all get to explore. We all get to find our dominant side and our submissive side and then choose what we most want in that moment.
And then how do we avoid being selfish in the bedroom? Like, do we make sure that, okay, like that was good for me and my healing, like what do you need now? Like how do we avoid being selfish?
Yeah,
In that?
so I'm gonna push back because my guess is that more often than not, we're not being selfish. We're just
Oh
not getting our
wow.
need. We're not getting our needs met fully,
Okay.
and so we have to ask for more when our needs aren't being met. So what we want to do is get to the deepest level of needs met, that feeling of freedom. Like if free is something you really want to feel, and in my work, I help people identify 6 different kind of the core sensitivities, I call it. But when we get those met, ideally we should feel satisfied. But here's the thing, we don't negotiate on the feeling. You've got to feel that thing. What we do negotiate on is the strategy to get to that feeling or the kink. So ideally, what we want is a kink that makes me feel my sensitivities and you feel your sensitivities.
Okay.
And now it works for both of us. And so it's kind of like improv. That's exactly what great sex is. It's improv. It's being able to attune to a person, to read them, to follow their lead or take the lead and let them follow, and to create characters that actually synchronize and create the healing we both need. And so I can promise you, if the sex is all about your kink, which is usually surface level, not getting to the deeper thing, the partner's not going to have fun. They're not going to attune. They're not going to respond as the great partner we want them to be. What we want is somebody who can read us and follow us. And I promise all the time, sex with my husband, I'll say, hey, did that work for you after the fact? And be like, nah, it was kind of boring. But, I was there. Like, I really tried. I was like, yeah, it didn't work for me either. But I was trying. Like, in the moment, in the characters, stay there, be there, fully embody that character. And then after the fact, what I always say is some phrase that shifts the energy, like, well, that was nice. And it's just kind of like, okay, now we're back to being human beings again.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I have two thoughts I'm wrestling with in my head. I'll just say it really quick. So I think, and I think others can resonate with this too. I think like I'm aware of the healing that can happen, but they're in this, kink and in the bedroom, but I still have like the family like shame. Like if
Yeah.
they knew, for
Mm-hmm.
those that experience that, which I think will be a lot, how do we deal with that? Should we throw that in the kink? Should we work that out elsewhere? Like how do we?
That's exactly what I would say. Throw it into the kink.
Okay,
So
wow.
one of the things that, and there are lots of ways. Now we want to separate kink from reality. Like we want to be respectful. If let's say you and your partner are sleeping at your parents' house and you want to have sex in your childhood bed, super hot and cool. Now, do we want to be the loudest we've ever been? Probably not. Not
Right,
because it's a gay
right.
kink thing, but because that's just rude in general.
Respectful, yeah.
And exactly. So we do want to be able to separate reality, but absolutely going back and reclaiming moments, especially for gay and queer men, is so important. One easy way to play with kink right here, right now, especially if we have submissive kink, which many of us, submissive shame, which many of us do, is get naked today, get on all fours, masturbate on all fours, facing a doorway, and just imagine, what if my dad walked in? What if this person walked in? What would they think of me right now? It will heighten the experience, but it will also make you reckon with that shame in your body to heal from it. You can work with that kink all the time. Your partner can say to you, especially again, submissive can often be, or bottoming can often bring up more shame, is, what would your dad think of you in this position? What would this person say? Or what would your because that can be really hot. And it also brings it into the fold where this is something that's already part of your sexuality. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
we think like, oh, why would I want to bring my parents into sex? They're already there because you're feeling
Yeah,
ashamed. That's
yeah,
already there. So what we want to do is consciously bring it in and subvert it. Allow it to be, this situation has no power over me anymore. Who cares? If I'm an adult who's having sex, first of all, no one should walk on adults having sex.
yeah.
That's their prerogative to privacy. But second of all, I shouldn't have to feel more shame than my straight counterparts feel about having very natural sexual expression.
Yeah. So really quick to that exercise, if we're on all fours, we're masturbating, facing the door, and we imagine our parents walking in, what next? Do we just sit with that emotion, or do we imagine saying, "Oh, hey, sorry, give me a sec, Dad," or like, what do we?
Yeah, great, Chris. I love the specificity here. So, it really depends on you, and you don't even have to imagine them walking in. It's just facing the door. It reminds your body of the possibility of someone walking in. So, if you're a person that's like, "Whoa, that's way too far," or that feels ancestral to me, do not even think about it. Just or maybe you leave the window a little, the
Sure.
blinds a
Yeah.
little up, or something that gives you that energy of I could be caught here. Can be really, really sexy and fun. But there are lots of it, depending on the person, lots of kinks I'll give people where or in fantasies I'll give people where you can imagine, like, let's say it was a bully from high school. We'll take it out of the family because that makes it a little easier sometimes. A bully from high school, and let's say they walk in on you and you are on all fours masturbating, imagining that you are being penetrated. And then in that situation, I might say to someone, he wouldn't look away. So stare him straight in the eyes while you're getting pounded. Just stare him, and he'll run to the bathroom and masturbate, won't he? And like that can be really healing and fun for people.
Wow.
And so play with that. If there's someone who has power over you, that could be a parent, that could be a bully, that could be a teacher, that could be someone it could be an ex, right? Who have power
Right.
over us. We want to take the power back. Kink
Wow.
is all about taking the power back. And that could be the power over the shame submission has over you, power a person has over you, power shame has over you. We want to take all of that back and say, I don't need to be the little good boy to be worthy. Like this shame doesn't have power over me anymore.
I love that we are coming back to worth. Like, I don't need to be that to be worthy. I can be this and be worth.
Yes.
Like, that's so fucking
Yeah,
healing.
if
Like,
I can be a bottom and be worthy, I can be a top and be worthy. One is not better than the other, and I'm so
that's
sorry we live in a world that has
yeah.
told us it is.
I am too. For those listening along, like I felt it. I've been there. Mike has been there. Um, that's just so mind blowing. Is like I can be successful and be worthy. I can be on my last dollar and be worthy. Like it doesn't
That's
fucking
absolutely
matter. Yeah. Mike, one thing I kind of want to ask is um, two things. Number one is, can we use this healing kink in hookups? We'll just start there. Like, let's
yeah.
start to talk about hookups a little bit.
So the answer is yes. With hookups, I'm bringing up some extreme kink or some deep shame
Sure.
here. We want to be a lot more mindful of the level of safety we have involved. So again,
Yes.
our minds are always going to be a lot kinkier than our bodies. They're going to expect our bodies to be able to do a lot more. And even over the chatting, right? We say some dirty shit, raunchy shit over chatting. When it comes to the actual hookup, our body may not be fully there. And so we want to be really mindful of our body. So we're going to think of hookups on a few different levels. One of which is what stays in the chat. What is kink just for the chat? And so that's something I want people to play with, is you can play with a character just in the chat. And if you are awkward when you meet up, that's okay. Or if you don't want to meet up at all, that's okay. I know I'm going to get lots of haters for saying this too, but it is okay. People already on Grindr are using it for just role play anyway. It's okay if you want to use that for your own healing. Now, ideally, we do want to have some level of like, I'm not in the mood to hook up today, but want to chat, and then we get to play. So we do want to be, honoring of their time and consent, but it's okay that you're using it just for healing. So that's the first place I want to start. The second is knowing that the mental kink is probably going to be a lot higher than the physical, and that you're going to be disappointed by the sex, quite frankly, because this isn't a person you have a lot of time to get safe with. The kink is not going to be nearly as high in person as it is, over the chatting. We want to modulate, we want to give ourselves maybe a lighter kink. So this might be like wearing a jock strap for the first time ever to a hookup. That might be enough kink for us. Or it might be something like you will say, oh my God. So favorite phrasing you want, I can't believe is the first phrase we want to hear. I can't believe I'm taking a dick up my ass. That type of phrasing, I can't believe, and then some shame after it, is a really easy way to play with dirty talk. It's really great kink because it's bringing in the shame, and it doesn't require a lot of active participation from our counterpart. So that's a way to bring in some light kink
Wow.
so that we
Yeah.
can bring some healing in.
Yeah, that's smart. Okay. And then, Mike, what about for those of us that we've done hookups for years and we're
Yeah.
kind of over it? Should we kind of, number one, improve the way we approach hookups, or should we, and how can we start to move more towards long-term relationships?
Yeah, this is a minefield. This is a lot more complicated question, but I'll do my best to answer it. First of all, I want us to have better hookups for sure. So I want us to get to the root of what we really want, which, if nothing else you get from today's conversation, if you can just ask yourself, when watching porn, this turns me on. What do I think it would make me feel? We just want to get to a feeling or emotion after that. So if we can say, oh my God, this scene was so hot. What was so hot about it? What do I think it would make me feel? We want to bake that into the hookups we're asking for. So if we're chatting with the guy and we know connected is something we want to feel, we might say like, when they ask like into, we might say like, like missionary, like deep eye contact, like things that will get us to that connected feeling. Or if it's a different one, like wild, let's say, we might say things like outdoor sex or, yelling and being spontaneous, like things that get us to that emotion. So the first thing we want to do is be able to communicate the deeper emotion better and be able to think through what are some examples of that. That's just going to give us a little less empty sex, more fulfilling sex, which is something that we want, knowing that it's still a stranger. Now, for many of us, we may just be over it, right? We may be
Mhm.
over and want to do some of this deep healing that I'm talking about. And we definitely want to look more for like a friends with benefits up to a long-term relationship, because these are things that feel a little bit safer and we have more familiarity in our nervous system with this person. And for that, I defer to you in a lot of ways because you are the relationship coach here. But I will say that these things we're wanting to feel aren't just specific to sex. So if you're wanting to feel free or you're wanting to feel connected, you're going to be able to assess that on a date or earlier on in the relationship, because we don't just want, what we're trying to do with this kink work we're doing is reconcile all of ourselves or bring
Yeah.
together all parts of ourselves. And so
Yeah.
the same you that wants to be wild in the bedroom might want dates of hiking, because that's going to allow you to be wild and assess their adventurousness.
And for those listening, that's a huge theme in healing, as Mike says, is like bringing all of yourself together. And that's where I do stand up and get involved, because if someone is telling me they want connection and they do want a long-term partnership and things like that, but they're staying stuck in hookups or something, that's where I'm like, because sometimes people will say like, oh, I like to be kinky and explore things. I'm like, why can't you do that with your boyfriend? Like if you had a
Yeah,
boyfriend, you know? So
exactly.
yeah, I'm like,
And
yeah,
actually, do you mind if I comment on, because that's
please.
actually something I get a lot in my work, is there is this dichotomy a lot of us feel, there's my $1 million word again, between romantic versus sexual, right? We often will think, well, my romantic needs are met in this relationship, but not my sexual needs. And often what will happen is we've got that same shame praise dichotomy. Romantic is the good boy, sexual is the bad boy. And we don't know how to bring them together. So often, because our partner loves us, gives a lot of praise to us for being romantic, we will think, I can't tell him that dark shit. It is so embarrassing. I can't go there. Or maybe if we're having some really kinky sex, we don't always know how to transition that to more romantic, best friends, things that you talked about earlier. And so actually bringing those together is another really important piece. And that shame praise dichotomy exercise can start to help us to think through why we don't feel comfortable with it. And also, again, I'm always going to say this, if we have a long-term partner and the sex isn't where we want it to be, thinking about what do we want to feel, what's beneath those acts, can create a more intimate conversation where they can see and know us better. Worst case scenario is they don't want to do the specific thing we're into, but they see and know us better and then find ways to meet our needs that are comfortable for them.
And I want to second that too, of what do we want to feel, because for those listening, we're basically always chasing a feeling. Even if you want to be in a relationship, I'm always like, what do you think that's going to do for you? There's a feeling that
Yes.
you want. So I
Yes.
love that there's some synchronicities there. So we're going to start to wind down a little bit. That was absolutely amazing, Mike. Thank you so much. For those listening, like I'm going to go back and have to rewatch this and take notes. So I hope that you guys will take advantage of this interview as well. Mike, the other thing I wanted to ask, let's see here, two more questions and we'll kind of wrap
True.
up. Your awareness about all of this is incredibly high. How did you get to this level of awareness? Is it just through your training, your experiences? Like, even I'm a relationship coach and I had some inklings, but this is like, I'm just kind of,
Yeah, shame. So lots of shame. I realized I have lots of thoughts about straight culture, but that, growing up, I didn't explore any homoeroticism because I didn't know about it. Because straight culture creates a world where boys, especially boys who are accepted by that culture and validated into that culture, things are coded as, bromance or man crush or, competitive, aggressive. And so not knowing that there may be a sexual undercurrent to some of these things. I mean, very common, right, for straight boys to watch porn together. Very common. There's a lots of things that we don't know. And so I didn't know my own queerness or homoeroticism at an early age. And it wasn't until a life-threatening illness that created this very intimate bond with another man where I felt safe to begin to explore some of these things and realized that there were things I coded as straight that maybe weren't straight before. And so because of that, I had extra layers of shame. I was a little bit older. I had many experiences with women. I was confused about my sexuality. That really caused me to look deeper than any of the conventional books were teaching me to what is it? What is desire? What is fluidity? What is kink? How do I will tell you, I've been with my husband for 12 years now. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm going to say it. We have a poster of a naked woman up there from a kink we played with the other day. We still play with kink from early years. We still play with lots of things that we do because that's healing for us. And so I've had to understand and learn how to really personalize my own kink. And through working with clients, I've been able to learn a lot more about many different types of kink out there.
yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one final question, but before I do, Mike, again, that was such a good conversation. How can we keep up with you online?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram barely, but you can follow me at Mike_Iamele. But also the easiest way is always go to my website or just email me. It's MikeIamele.com or just Mike@MikeIamele.com.
Okay. Do you have a podcast as well, Mike?
I do not. I've been on like
Oh, okay.
over 100 years
Because I saw
ago. So
your link
I
tree.
do. If
Okay.
you want to check out my Spotify, there's like 80 or 90 podcasts
Oh,
on there,
wow.
and I do specifically have some related to gay and queer sex, so you can listen to some of those.
Okay. But your website and Instagram is probably the best place, it
Yeah,
sounds
yeah, yeah.
like.
If you want to
Okay.
reach out, sure.
Wonderful. What's one final piece of advice you can give someone who's trying to create a relationship or sex life to meet their needs?
Yeah, the first one, I guess, is know those needs. So begin to figure out what you need. I think a lot of times we identify with the characters so fully that we begin to think we are the characters and take on, like, I need to always be important. Well, that's not really a need, right? You may need to feel important, but that doesn't mean you need to be around important people. So, how do you feel important? There are a million ways to feel that, starting with yourself, right? And so I think part of it is when you are next time you're watching porn, next time you are on Instagram and you see a thirst trap and you think he's so hot, I want you to stop yourself. Because what happened was really is you thought I'm turned on, and then you thought I must be turned on because of him. He's so hot. And you immediately gave your power away. And I want to stop doing that. I want instead you say, I'm turned on, and then say, why? Is it because of his pose? Is it because of what he's doing? Is it because of the act? What do I think that would make me feel? And now what you've just done is taken the power back. It is amazing that that turns you on, but that's about you. That's not about him. So I want you to take the power back because then that gives you the opportunity to learn something about yourself and learn what you need or like in the bedroom. And that can be immensely empowering. And then you can bring it, see what your body looks like when you feel that thing. And maybe you'll feel more attracted to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Take the power back and feel more attracted to yourself. That's beautifully said. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for the time. I know those listening just absolutely love the conversation. And we'll kind of let you go. And for those listening, thanks so much. We'll catch you guys next time.
And thanks for having me.